starting right now. So, if you don't mind, I will introduce you one more time.
Sure, go right ahead.
This is a Transitions Protocol, a new channel that has been doing extraordinarily well, very well received by everybody all over the world, because we are talking about things that the legacy media, CNN, and others don't want to talk about. And we have as founding members people that you might know. Uh, Pepe Escobar, a roving correspondent who has been reporting from all over the world, very well liked by millions of people. Dari Johnson, ex FBI, Vijay Prasad, who has spent a lifetime in talking about the changing global picture and the emergence of Global South. And we are very pleased today, extraordinarily privileged to have Scott Horton with us, a man whose writing, whose work I've admired. My background goes back to the 60s, the famous anti-war protests in UC Berkeley. I was a freshman. I was among the thousands who was raising a voice, and I have seen everything that has come since then. The very, very bad and very little good. Scott Horton has hosted more than 6,000 interviews on U.S. foreign policy, war, civil liberties. He has become a leading libertarian voice against American militarism. He is the author of Enough Already, Fool's Errand, and Provoked, books that challenge the entire narrative around the U.S. war on terror that has been going on and on and on and on. And he has written about Afghanistan, the new Cold War with Russia. He debates neocons, former officials, and think tank hawks on Iran, Israel, and Ukraine, and has built a stellar reputation for meticulous reporting and historical detail. So, Scott, uh, I'm sorry I had to do that all over again because I failed to hit the record button, but we are recording right now.
Well, thank you
So
very much for having me on the show. Appreciate that nice intro.
you more than deserve it. Go ahead, please.
Well, what do you have in mind?
I think that our audiences, I mean, they are global and from all over the world, should be and are interested in what will eventually come out of Iran.
Mhm.
Why this happened? I mean, we know why it happened, but we want to know from an expert why it happened.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I'm also very curious to know what's going to happen. I really don't claim to be much of a prognosticator, as much of a critic of things that already happened that I hold a grudge about. So I don't really know. I mean, we can talk about the hypotheticals. There's some pretty obvious things that could result from this, but then there are reactions and counter reactions, and the future's always in motion, so to speak, right? But as far as what's been going on here, essentially, the war party in America is synonymous with the Likud, with Israel's Amen corner, and with the Israeli right. And um, so that's really who APAC represents. And when you think of the neoconservative movement, people use that term very broadly a lot of times, but it's really a specific group of people, no more than 100 people probably, who make up the neoconservative movement. And not every single one of them, but virtually all of them are tied to Israel, or at least are, ideological Zionists and closer to, Ariel Sharon and Netanyahu's party, the Likud. Now, Sharon later split. There are, minor differences from them, but the point being the Israeli nationalist right, as opposed to the old Labor Party of the founders of the Israeli state. And so these guys are hardliners, and their position is that they want to steal all of Palestine, and they don't want to negotiate with Arafat or his successors, and come up with any kind of reasonable solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict. They prefer the final solution, and that is the expulsion of the Palestinian people, one way or the other, the easy way or the hard way, from the last of historic Palestine, and especially the West Bank. I mean, what we've seen in Gaza might confuse the issue a bit there because of what they have done has been so drastic there in trying to, as they put it, make the Strip unlivable so that the people will voluntarily emigrate. You see how that works? A knife at your starving belly, and then you choose to leave. But it's the West Bank that they really want. That's Judea and Samaria, and that's in the biblical promise much more than, any site in Gaza is, in their ideology as far as that goes. And so they're determined that instead of having the old kind of Labor Party policy of attempting to go ahead and compromise to some degree with the Palestinians. And I don't want to give Rabin and Perez too much credit, or Barak for that matter, too much credit here, because they were really trying to screw the Palestinians and give them very much a pseudo state, but still would have been a hell of a lot better than what they've had to fare ever since the Likud has ruled instead. But see, the problem is that as long as Israel is completely lording it over the Palestinians and threatening their entire annihilation as a people, then that makes it incredibly difficult for them to get along with anybody else. And so instead of having peace through negotiation and diplomacy and neighborliness, it's a brand new state of some pretty foreign people in a foreign land. If they're going to get along, they're going to have to figure out how to get along or not. Figure out how to just be so much stronger than everyone else and just rule through total dominance at everyone else's expense, so that way they get what they want and the weak have to simply suffer it. And that is really the bottom line of the clean break doctrine that David Wormser wrote for Benjamin Netanyahu in 1996. But it said, listen, there's a threat, and the threat is the Shiite axis of power from revolutionary Iran through Ba'athist Syria and to Hezbollah, which is sort of Iran's 51st state there in southern Lebanon, the Shiite Arabs in southern Lebanon. And they're the threat to Israel's hegemony over what they want of the rest of historic Palestine there. So the solution to that, they thought, was, well, first of all, this position of total dominance over the region. But then secondly, and just idiotically, and more specifically, I guess I mean to say, rather than secondly, more specifically, what they wanted to do at the time was focus, as David Wormser wrote, focus on getting rid of Saddam Hussein in Iraq. But see, that made no sense. And if you know anything about the region, that should immediately occur to you that makes no sense. Why would you get rid of Iran's worst enemy, Sunni Saddam? He's the roadblock between Iran and Syria and Hezbollah and southern Lebanon. Why would you want to get rid of him? And the answer is because they completely stupidly thought that if they did get rid of Saddam Hussein, that Jordan and Turkey and America would have dominance in Iraq. And they would make the Iraqi Shiites, first of all, be friends with Israel, but also insist that Hezbollah stop being friends with Iran and be friends with Israel instead. And this was a total pipe dream of idiocy, this smoke that was blown up the rear ends of the neoconservatives by the Iraqi exile, Ahmed Chalabi, who's more famous for also providing all the liars who lied us into war with all their testimonies about the weapons of mass destruction. And it was the same group, and he was just using and lying to the neoconservatives and promising that if we get rid of Saddam Hussein, it's going to put America, way up and our allies way up in Iraq. And instead, of course, what happened was instead, of course, what happened was in the war is they just put Iran's best friends in power. When you think about what we call the Iraq War, what I call Iraq War II, because, of course, there was the first one back in 91. But in Iraq War II, that whole war from 2003 through 2008 or 11 or so should be properly understood as America's war for Iran and Iran's best friends among the Shiite Iraqi Arabs against their Sunni Arab enemies, including even cleansing the capital city of Baghdad of them and conquering and consolidating control over the predominantly Shiite regions of southern and southeastern Iraq. And by the way, leaving Western Iraq and Northwestern Iraq sort of stateless and wide open for the taking. The Shiites never really tried to exercise their dominance over the minority Sunni Arab regions the way those minority Sunni Arab regions had sure tried to exercise dominance over them under Saddam. But they just said, hey, you know what? We got the capital city and we got all the oil in the south and up in the north. And the Sunnis out west, they can just burn in the sun. We don't even need to rule them. They got nothing for us to even loot. So, but we don't want to share with them. So screw them, and left Western Iraq wide open. Then and so I should stop here and say, this error on the part of the neoconservatives, where they put America and especially Israel's strategic rival, Iran, up 2 pegs in Baghdad, they understood very well what an error that was. And his staff, Elliot Abrams and Zalmay Khalilzad, 2 card-carrying neoconservatives, they explained the facts of life to W. Bush back in 05, 06, and said, listen, we really are fighting a war for our strategic rivals here. Not our enemies. Not that Iran did 9/11. That was the bin Ladenites, who are angry at us for being too close to their governments in Saudi and Egypt, propping them up at the people's expense. They weren't agents of the axis of evil, but the axis of America's allies and alliance system, the GCC allies in the region. But anyway, never mind that. So when you look back at this 21st century of American Middle Eastern foreign policy, and you look at Iraq War II, and then you look at the time after that when Barack Obama comes in, and all the rest of our time in the Middle East ever since then, the only way to properly look at that is America attempting to figure out how to fix the mistake of Iraq War II when they listened to the neoconservatives, who were really listening to Netanyahu more than even Sharon. Sharon was really more of an Iran hawk, and he went along with the war in Iraq for sure, and even helped lie us into it. But it was really Netanyahu's passion project was to go after Iraq first, and therefore the neocons in America, who helped Bush lie us into the thing. But then in the aftermath of the war, or even in the middle of the war, they realized what they were doing. And they said, well, we got to finish what we started, but then we got to figure out how to make up for it. So then this is how to explain Barack Obama's dirty war in Syria, especially, where from the very beginning, it was so clear from 2011 on, we knew it was reported. I mean, I covered it on my show. That's how I remember it so well, reading it in the press and talking with the guys that wrote the articles about it, that we knew from 2011 on that just like in Libya, they were essentially siding with the bin Ladenites, siding with the guys who had been al-Qaeda in Iraq during Iraq War II, the worst kind of bin Ladenite vanguard of the Sunni insurgency, the resistance against America and new Iraqi Shiistan's war against them, the vanguard of the Sunni insurgency. And as we call them, the foreign fighters, the bin Ladenites, the terrorists, people who were, for especially ideological reasons, flocking to Iraq just to fight against us, just like they had against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan in the 80s. Well, these were the same people who came home to Libya, where Obama took their side against Gaddafi, which was really a sideshow to what I'm talking about here, but was important, and showed, again, this redirection toward the Sunni side. And then they did the same thing in Syria. And when they did it in Syria, and as I show in my book, Enough Already, this was all very deliberate and very clearly explained in their motive. The Iraq War had put Iran up 2 pegs in Baghdad. Now we got to take them down a peg in Damascus. So that's why we're supporting the bin Ladenites, suicide bomber head choppers. And we knew that Saudi Arabia is emptying their prisons and sending all their bin Ladenites off to fight in the war. And we knew that they were coming across the border from Iraq. We were actually still doing drone strikes against them in, CIA lower level operations, killing bin Ladenites in Iraq, where we're still on the Shiite side in 2011 and 12 and 13, chasing these guys across the line into Syria, where they magically turn into heroic, moderate rebels fighting against the evil dictator. And now we love them and we're on their side. But the problem with that was they were supposed to go west and sack Damascus, but they didn't. In fact, the Iraqi-dominated faction of al-Qaeda in Iraq and Syria broke away from the Syrian-dominated faction of al-Qaeda in Iraq and Syria and created the Islamic State Caliphate, first in Western Syria, and then, in Far Eastern Syria, I mean to say, and then 1 year in 2013, and then 1 year later, they invaded Western Iraq. Remember how I said that Sunni Western Iraq was left wide open? The Shiites didn't want it. They just left them out there to burn. They got all the oil, screw them.
This is the creation of ISIS.
This is the ISIS caliphate, right? So then So this was Obama's and, whatever, the war party's brilliant plan to spite Iran for winning Iraq War II was, well, we're going to get rid of Assad. But they didn't do that. They just propped up Baghdadi, who sacked Mosul and Tikrit and Fallujah and Ramadi. Great job, guys. And so then they launched Iraq War III, the anti-ISIS war, the anti-caliphate war from in the summer of 2014 that lasted through 2018 to destroy the caliphate that they built to spite the Shiites because they were mad at them for winning the last war that we had fought for them. So then we fought not two in a row, but we fought Iraq War II for them. Then we built the caliphate against them. Then we fought Iraq War III for them. And so you can see how frustrating this would be to the Israeli inspired American war party here, that these are two major operations in a row in Iraq and Syria, both of which were supposed to spite Iran and weaken Iran, and both of which ended up backfiring and empowering Iran. And not only were they empowered in Iraq War III in Iraq, but they also, of course, were bidden by Assad to come and help fight Assad. So was Hezbollah, came in and got all battle-hardened experience in fighting against the jihadist side, the Sunni jihadi side in the Syrian war. And then, of course, the Russians came in 2015 with their air force and bombed the crap out of the CIA's Al-Qaeda guys and put an end to, and they waited, by the way, it wasn't until ISIS and Nusra both, the Syrian-dominated faction of Al-Qaeda in Syria, who were marching together basically on Damascus before Putin finally intervened and stopped them from doing it. And now this is the revolution that finally did take place at the end of 2024. Those same terrorists did end up seizing Damascus and overthrowing the Ba'athist regime then. But for 15 years there, all this really did was enhance Iranian power in Syria as well as in Iraq. So, again, to the frustration of the war party, they keep killing all these people and doing all these things. I'll skip all the back and forth, but let's just say, and it's in the book, and if you just search my name and Yemen in YouTube, you can see older things where, speeches and interviews I've given where I explain the background to the Yemen thing. But just long story short, American intervention in Yemen led to the increased power of Al-Qaeda and the increased power of the Houthis. And in opposition to them, and America was even helping the Houthis kill Al-Qaeda guys until Obama stabbed the Houthis in the back and took Al-Qaeda's side against them in 2015. But they would have never even taken the capital city if it hadn't have been, and at the end of 2014, if it hadn't have been for Bush and Obama's intervention in the country before that. So another place where they were trying to weaken the Iranians and they ended up only empowering their friends. So now, then October 7th,
you're an encyclopedia, man, and I really, really, really appreciate it.
Well, I hope, by the way, I mean, I'm not trying to just say like, well, look at me, I got a bunch of names and dates. But the point is, this is supposed to sort of take you through like the cause and effect here and put you in the shoes of the war party. Put yourself in the shoes of the Likud, where everything you touch catches on fire. You're supposed to be, which, and I mean, not on purpose. I mean, they're trying to achieve these certain goals and everything keeps blowing up right in their face and getting worse. Right. So this is essentially the narrative, my way of explaining the last 25 years of leading up to our conflict with Iran here is this.
And that's exactly what I wanted. Scott, that's exactly what I believe our audiences wanted to hear. Many of them do not know that this has a big, long history behind it.
Right.
This has a genesis behind it.
Exactly.
This just did not happen all of a sudden. Now, what did happen all of a sudden, as far as we know, is that Trump is the only guy who was a president who got dog walked into attacking Iran.
Right. Okay. So that's a good time to bring up then. I'll get back to Israel and the current war, but this is a good place to talk about the pretext for war. The major pretext for war here is Iran's nuclear program. And when you say dog walked, you're absolutely right about that. And another way to say it would be, I've been joking lately that, they always say it's 4-dimensional chess. You just don't understand this high level thing. And what it is just checkers, right? And what happened is Netanyahu said, listen, I already got you to agree that Iran can't have nuclear weapons and that you won't let them. And Trump goes, yeah. And then he says, And I also already got you to agree that, come on, their civilian program is just a weapons program. There's no civilian program. They're enriching uranium. They want to make nukes out of it. You're no fool. You're not going to let them fool you and get away with that. And so there's no difference between, what they are doing is a weapons program, right? You agree to that, don't you? And then Trump would go, yeah. And then they go, okay, double jump, king me, dude. Now you have to do what I say. You have to bomb them. You agreed. You moved your red line and you've agreed that they've crossed it. Now, nothing has really changed. You understand? This is all just rhetoric. This is a stupid, there is no even red pen in the room. The red line itself is purely this metaphysical construct of just nothingness, right? They just made it up. It doesn't really mean anything other than I've decided that now I'm going to war over this thing. Whereas last Tuesday, I didn't need to. Today I do, because essentially you helped me to change the definitions of what it is that we're dealing with. American policy since W. Bush and all the way through Obama, there's no partisanship here. W. Bush, Obama, Trump 1, Biden. The policy has always been that were Iran to break out and attempt to make a nuclear weapon, that we would start a war against them and bomb them, and they would not finish making that bomb because they'd be dead. We would not let them get that far where they were able to finally, make a fissile core and start splitting atoms and making big bangs. We're just not going to let them get that far. Obama swore to God 100 times, and I believe him that he meant it, that we are not going to let them get a nuke. We will absolutely start a war to prevent them from getting a nuke. But the thing is, we don't need to, because they're not making a nuke. Okay? It's only when
they forgot that.
That's right. Yeah, it's only when you change the construct and say, essentially, come on, what do you think that they're enriching uranium for? And then you're just supposed to fill in the rest, but I'll fill it in for you with actual details, okay? Here's the thing of it, and there's no need to cut the Ayatollah any slack here, okay? Let's be perfectly reasonable here. When the Ayatollah says that God says we shouldn't make nukes, at least I believe that the Ayatollah ain't nothing but a politician. I don't see nothing holy about him. Ain't my religion anyway. And I have no reason to believe that he believes what he says. And I have every reason to believe that if the Ayatollah felt like it, then God could change his mind about atomic weapons tomorrow. Okay? However, when the Ayatollah says to his government that God says it's his opinion and therefore it's mine and ours, that we are forbidden from making atomic bombs, that is the law. He didn't say, pss, pss, pss. What I really mean is go ahead and make nukes. I'm just lying to the world about this. There is no that in it, okay? The old Ayatollah, the oldest Ayatollah, Khomeini, had forbidden the making of atomic bombs or even chemical weapons back in the 80s. He died in 89, and then Khamenei took over, and he reaffirmed these religious edicts over and over as supreme leader. It is completely forbidden to pursue these weapons. No germs, no chemicals, and no atom bombs. And however, though, again, I got no faith in any politician. Maybe double, triple, I have no faith in any theocrat, okay? There's no reason to presume the honesty here, only other than in the sense of the measurable results, okay, which is they haven't made atom bombs this whole time. We're having this conversation halfway through 2026. If they were making atom bombs, you'd think they'd have a few by now, right? This is 1940s technology. They clearly have not tried, or else they clearly, obviously, would have them. What they did was they achieved essentially a latent nuclear deterrent. They proved to the world that they knew how to enrich uranium. They knew how to convert it to gas. They knew how to convert it back to metal again, and that they could enrich it to whatever percent they want. It's simply a matter of continue to inject it in the cascades and keep it going until it's a higher percentage. If you can enrich to 3.6, you can enrich to 90. They've proven that they've mastered the fuel cycle, no problem. So what they're saying essentially was, they were in a bind too, by the way. Let's assume the very worst about the Ayatollah, okay? Let's assume the very worst about him for the sake of argument here. Let's say he really wanted to make an atom bomb. He really kind of couldn't, man. Because if he broke out and tried, there's no way he could have done it in secret. America would know. The IAEA would know. Their program was too above board, too inspected. There was no way to divert from their civilian program to a military program without getting caught, without it being a Manhattan level style thing that they could not disguise. And then America would start a war against them and destroy it and them before they got their first atom bomb together. And so if it was a race, the president of the United States, even Barack Obama or anyone else, he could pick up the phone and B-2 bombers will take off from Missouri and they will bomb Iran by dinner time, right? And there's nothing Iran can do about that. And they know that. Like their bluff is already called. So they settle for a half a bluff. They settle for a latent deterrent, which said, we know how to enrich uranium. Don't make us make a bomb by bombing us. America says, don't you make a bomb or we'll bomb you. They go, we're not making a bomb, so don't bomb us. But if you do, then we might. Now, they would very rarely say that. I think they almost never actually said that. But we can very clearly read their body language as saying, look, you know we've mastered the fuel cycle here, okay? There's no point in pretending that they're being coy about it. They weren't really being coy. We mastered the fuel cycle. But see, then what happened was last June in 2025, the Israelis and Donald Trump, especially the Americans, called their bluff. Instead of Obama's policy that said, if you break out to a nuke, I'll attack you, or even Trump 1's policy, if you break out toward a nuke, I'll attack you. He said, I'm going to attack you now, then let's see you break out toward a nuke. And the thing about that was, hey, it was a bluff, and he did call it. This was the reason they couldn't really break out toward a nuke, because America could reach out and touch someone before they could do anything about it. And so Trump just decided to jump the gun and go ahead and bomb them. And now here's the thing. I don't think anybody knows the exact status of the centrifuges at Fordow and Natanz, but we know that they're buried down there and that they're completely offline, that there's no production, no enrichment of uranium taking place whatsoever. If there were men down there, they're buried alive. They hit the elevator shafts and the air vents and whatever they could, and they, at the very least, they took the stuff offline. And crucially, they hit the conversion facility at Isfahan, which is where you take uranium metal, you transform it into gas, and then after you enrich it, transform it back to metal again. Well, without that conversion facility, they can't make fuel rods or atom bomb cores or any other thing. They can't do anything. Trump calls it the uranium dust. He's talking about the enriched uranium hexafluoride gas. He calls it dust because it's like, the metallized, this aerosolized metal. But the point being, they can't turn it back to metal again. It's stuck in hexafluoride gaseous state in its canisters, and their conversion facility is offline. So 1 year ago, I don't know that he necessarily literally obliterated their program, but he figuratively did. And in fact, in the current ceasefire memorandum of understanding from the end of the 2026 war, they say in there, we will keep the status quo on our nuclear program and on sanctions. So America promises no new sanctions while we're negotiating a solution here over the medium term. But they promise, essentially what they mean by that is they promise not to restart Fordow and Natanz, to leave them off as they have been buried and offline for the last year, and to leave it that way at least until the negotiations are complete. So in other words, just to say that Trump called their bluff, and for what it's worth, B-2 bombers and bunker buster bombs can do some damage, at least enough. Again, I don't know. I should stipulate those centrifuge facilities were buried very deeply at Fordow and Natanz under granite and other kinds of very hard metals. I'm not a mineralogist, but I didn't mean to say metals. I mean stones, rock, very hard types that make it. Dolomite is part of the minerals there too. It's very, very hard stone. So it could be that the centrifuges are perfectly fine down there, but just access to them is cut off, literally, and again, figuratively too, because again, now that Trump's called their bluff, let's say that they sent everyone to go and try to reopen Natanz. Well, Trump would just bomb it, right? There's nothing stopping him from starting up the war again and sending the B-2s back in there. So, he very well could do that. So, sorry about the dog there.
That's okay. That's fine. It's perfectly fine.
Um, and so now, but a couple of things about that, right? Is first of all, it goes to show that the casus belli for this war, begun this year, 2026, was completely fake, because there have been no advances in Iran's nuclear program. Donald Trump was resorted to the absolutely absurd lie. It's the most ridiculous thing in the world, this lie that Iran was 2 weeks away from a bomb. Come on. Their entire everything was frozen in place. There's not even, like, you would have to make up 6 more lies to be the details explaining that lie. Like, there's just nothing to that at all. Nothing. There was no advance on their nuclear program at all. So why did Trump have to attack them on February 28th when he didn't have to attack them on February 27th? And the answer is because his lies bluff was being called. Steve Witkoff was coming back. He was talking to the Omanis, we're playing the middleman, but they were having indirect talks in Oman, and the Omanis were getting everybody on the same page. It was working. We think that we can they said that the Ayatollah was willing to give between a 3 and 5 year moratorium on all enrichment and willing to negotiate on all this and that. I forget all the details, but it was essentially the point being that, and I believe this was even directly quoted here somewhere. I don't know exactly. I don't think it was the New York Times, but there was a quote in there somewhere where Trump had said even to Witkoff, like, how long would it take to get a deal? And they said, well, it won't be easy. It'll be some months, but we think we can do it. And then they started the war that night, right? So the idea being that they were trying to preempt war, that the nuclear program was only at that point the barest of pretexts, especially after last June. They had no pretext for war. And if Witkoff was going to get them to agree to not even try to enrich for another 5 years, well, hell, at least that's the basis of a good negotiation that we could get started on, right? So then they started the war immediately because the nuclear issue was a fake pretext for war. It was never about a nuclear weapons program at all. And by the way, in this war, they didn't even hit their nuclear facilities because they were already offline.
So Scott, the $1 million question has been asked thousands of times, but you are a very good person to provide your perspective on it. The thousands of interviews you have done, the entire lifetime in anti-war movements. How did Trump, when everybody else, all other U.S. presidents had said no to Netanyahu, how did he get himself dog-walked? And now maybe belatedly realizes that he accomplished nothing.
Look, it's a few things. I mean, the real answer is nobody knows for sure, right? But there are some things that are obvious, including a ton of money, including that he's just
mostly a ton of money.
That's got to be a part of it, right? Mary Madison's money and singers and the rest. But also, I think he likes Netanyahu. Barack Obama was caught on a hot camera one time. I hope no one thinks that I've taken Barack Obama's side here. I did blame him for building the ISIS caliphate a minute ago. Don't anyone misunderstand me. This is the only time I ever sympathized with Obama on anything his whole career long was he's caught on a hot mic telling the president of France, oh God, you think you hate him. I got to deal with him every day about Netanyahu.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Okay, I think Trump likes him. I think Trump thinks of Netanyahu as like a total kindred spirit and they get along just fine. And he calls him Bibi and he calls him Donald and we're friends here and why not? What's the deal? You want to blow something up? I'll blow something up with you, pal. And I don't think he's pushing on an open door there. They're friends. They don't have this kind of animosity, I don't think. So that makes it very easy. And then also, I've been joking about this too. Sorry to keep recycling the same damn thing, but I figure there's got to be a national intelligence estimate in Israel that simply just says, flatter him. And then that's it, right? You just tell him you are so brave and strong and tall, and no one is as brave and wealthy and successful as you. And so you're going to do the brave thing. That Barack Obama, he's such a wimp, not like you with all your strength and courage and bravery that you have, the great leader that you are. You're going to take this chance because it's going to work, man. It's going to be great. And you are going to be remembered as great. And I think that they just would tell him that over and over again, and you could hear it, and he would sort of reflect this back. And, you know, some of this may just be him kind of, you know, freestyling, but a lot of this seemed to be, to me, my interpretation of it, my speculation, I guess, was that he was kind of regurgitating some propaganda that he had been fed recently, you know, when he talked about stuff about how he's a better president than Abraham Lincoln and a better president even than George Washington. And maybe he's even like comparable to biblical level figures. And especially when you consider the people who are talking, you know, people like Mike Huckabee and Cruz and all these people, they're telling him variations of like, listen, man, this is beyond presidential level stuff. This is world historical level greatness. You know, the lesson of World War II you're supposed to understand is that America should have invaded Germany in 1934, and none of this would have ever happened. And so that's the lesson now, is everyone's Hitler, and we can never be Chamberlain. We must always be Churchill. We must always be Roosevelt, and we must always take the fight to the enemy before it's the bad guy. And in this case, in their words, I'm not saying this is accurate at all. I think, in fact, they're liars and hiding behind this, obviously. But in their words, it's the Jews. And you will be saving the Jews, the population of Israel, from certain annihilation at the hands of the Islamo-Nazi fascist terror masters in Tehran, who surely will kill them all with their atomic weapons if you don't get in there and stop this from happening. And I think, you know, like on one level, it's all excuses for war and pretext. But on another level, like, I think you probably understand that from the Israeli point of view,
and those of Epstein, issues as well, perhaps.
Well, whatever. But I'm just saying on this part of it, you know, Netanyahu is not. This part isn't necessarily a lie. This part is, because it's not a question of truth or falsity. It's a question of like, where does he draw his line, his metaphysical line for his doctrine? And his doctrine is that Iran must not have a nuclear program at all, because they're going to make nukes and they're going to use them against Israel. And so Bush, Obama, which he went in there during Bush, it was Ehud Olmert, but he tried to. But then Obama, Trump, Biden, get in there, man. America, you have to solve this problem. We don't have the strength to, but you have to. I think that's not a lie. Right? It's a lie that they're making nukes. It's a lie that they're weeks away. It's a lie that they've decided to try and then that now they're going to attack Israel. But it's not a lie that Israel won't accept them having a nuclear program at all, because Israel's national security establishment considers even a civilian program to be an existential threat, simply in a more embryonic state. But in fact, as we talked about, they've mastered the fuel cycle. As I've said before, like, to give the devil his due, to give the war party their due, there is some truth to the idea that there's this giant loophole in the non-proliferation treaty, which says, oh yeah, you have an unalienable right. That's the quote. You have an unalienable right to peaceful nuclear technology. But that does literally mean that you can march right up to possession of fissile bomb cores without actually making them. And you could, master the fuel cycle and get yourself in the position through pursuing. You could have a heavy water reactor that's only for electricity, and it just happens to produce plutonium waste that you can make bombs out of, right? You can march very close to a nuclear weapon and still be within the treaty and still have a civilian program. So I'm not saying this is a good enough excuse for war by any means, and I'm not saying any lies are true, but I'm just saying it is the Israeli doctrine that they are already far too far along in their nuclear program, and that something absolutely had to be done about it. And this is something. They hoped with the attack last June that it would, essentially develop from there, hopefully into a regime change in the first place. But they ended up calling off. Trump sent in the B-2s, hit Fordow and Natanz, and then canceled the whole thing after that. But then this time around, they were clearly hoping. Obviously, I think they were hoping. I don't know if they were really planning for. I mean, I guess so, right? Like, we know they armed the Kurds and some Kurdish groups and all this. And they were hoping that they would get some kind of insurrection. Now, maybe they believed their own lies, or maybe they didn't, their own hype about how easy it would be to topple the government. But at the very least, their plan B was, hey, as long as Donald Trump believes it, that it'll be easy. All we got to do, we just got to get America in there, get the war started. And especially they kill the Ayatollah, kill all the top leadership, then that's going to leave a very angry lower rank to take power and be more difficult. And the more difficult Iran is, the worse war they get out of it. And the worse destruction of Iran they get, whether they're able to parachute the monarch in there, the son of the previous monarch to take over the country or not, they can get America to essentially just set Iran back severely, then they're happy with that. And that's what they got. And we did, at the same time, we really, increased Iran's power in the region in a way, which that was your original question at the start of this thing, which we can address in a second. But just like on the literal level, their nuclear program, especially last year, has been set back. They have lost hundreds of billions of dollars worth of infrastructure and whatever that did get bombed in the days of the full-scale air war there. So they, whatever conventional force they have has been set back. So the Israelis are just going to have to take that. I mean, I think that there's a reason that they're very angry now. It's because the war is stopping short of their goals. But the problem being that America never had the ability to accomplish their goals, right? It all really hinged on this magic wish that if you kill the Ayatollah and the top few leaders of the IRGC and the military and whoever, that then things will change. It'll be like Venezuela, where more compliant leadership comes to the fore, and then you can deal with them and they'll do what you say. That was why Trump said nobody thought they were going to close the Strait of Hormuz. Obviously, everyone knew that was a potentiality. But the point is, what he's really saying there is, we thought that they would be gone. Who's going to close the Strait of Hormuz on the third day when we got regime change on the second? But we didn't. And so that was the problem. So then they lost the war, right? The Iranians proved they had essentially built their entire strategy around their missile force, right? When Trump crows about bombing their Navy and their Air Force, fine, but nobody cares. Their military strategy was never centered around their Navy or their Air Force, nor even their land army. I mean, they have a 1 million man army or, high hundreds of thousands, but that's just infantry. And their job is, in case anyone ever invades the country, to fight. But they're not an expeditionary force. They have no ability to project power. I mean, imagine Iran trying to march a land army across Iraq and Jordan to Israel or something. No way. They don't have the ability to do anything like that. But what they did focus on was building up their missile force as another attempted deterrent. That you can't attack us because then we'll attack you back, and in such a way that you won't like it. Nobody thinks that Iran is as powerful a country as the United States, but they are on their own coast. They are in their own region. And their coast, by the way, is the entire northeastern side of the Persian Gulf. That's why it's called that. Tucker Carlson, I think it was Tucker Carlson, was making fun of these kooks in Washington. They just don't look at maps. They don't. And they just have sort of this amorphous blob of a shape of what Iran must be in their head, but they're not really thinking. They never really zoomed all the way in on that strait and said, boy, that is narrow, or whatever. A lot of them haven't. And then they don't want to listen to the specialists who tell them otherwise. So, I'm sure you're familiar with that map. It's kind of a funny meme. It's a map of the Middle East, and it says, well, if Iran isn't a threat to the United States, then how come they put their country so close to all our military bases? And then it shows all the military bases surrounding Iran.
Yes. Well, I was going to ask you about that, Scott. What is the future of all that?
Well, so this is the thing. I used to always joke and sort of tell people that, listen, in fact, that meme goes to show why we can't fight Iran is we station all our guys so close to them. Essentially, our government has made our own guys such a tripwire that we dare not fight Iran because so many of our guys would be in danger within their range. Yeah, so that
as they were.
In an ironic way, our military empire over there was keeping the peace because Washington was putting America's own military in grave danger in the event of a war. Now, Iran was never going to start a war against us and hit all our guys over there. They weren't in danger any other day of the week. But if we're going to start a war, then all of our guys are at risk. And then we saw that that's exactly what happened. And they were able to reach out and touch every single American base from northern Iraqi Kurdistan all the way down to Oman, and including in Jordan and, of course, in Israel. They were able to essentially overwhelm whatever counterfire with missiles and drones. And, it always was their missile force. Then they have only added drones over the last few years here, to their defensive picture there. And boy, it's a proverbial stuck your hand in a hornet's nest and got stung. And then what? You try to keep punching at it. At some point, you got to stop. This ain't working. You need to get away from that net.
And we're there now, Scott. We have been there for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they called ceasefire back in April because, boy, what are we going to do? And now, Trump has said it's got to be the world record. He claimed 40 times that we have a peace deal and then went back to fighting again and delays or whatever. But then now they finally do have this memorandum of understanding, as I'm sure you know and all of your audience can appreciate if you take a good look at it, that America gives everything and gets nothing other than the status quo, the reopening of the strait. And on every other issue of import, they
this is exactly what I wanted
or punted.
You to talk about, Scott. What did we get?
Well, so the goals of the war were to completely destroy their civilian nuclear program, to change the regime and to a pro-American regime, to end their medium range, short, medium, intermediate range missile force, to end their support for Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen. And I don't know, whatever, degrade their overall military capability, I guess. Well,
and what did they get?
Well, they degraded their overall military capability, I guess, but not by that much. Again, on the crucial aspect, their missile force, it's virtually entirely intact for intensive purposes. It's at above 70%, remaining and capable. There's a new story in the Financial Times about how they had many of their so-called missile cities, their underground bunkers and launcher systems that they never even deployed in the war because the primary systems were still up and running the whole time. And they were able to get them under granite shelter to such a degree that American bunker buster bombs weren't able to do a damn thing about it. We would hit them, the Americans would hit them and hit them and hit them, and then they would be firing missiles from the same location within 15 minutes. Like, dang, what are you going to do? And then, so anyway, we degraded their, some of their military capabilities, certainly their military industries, all their not all, many of their missile factories and things like that were bombed and all that. So they got set back a bit there. But we are not getting their enriched uranium out of there. They're already talking about, they accept that they know that in the negotiations, Donald Trump's already playing it down. They're like, who cares if they have some uranium as long as they dilute it down to a lower percentage than this 60%. Well, that's the only reason they enriched up to 60% was so that America would negotiate with them and they could dilute it back down again. If they were marching toward 90% bomb grade, they would have done it years ago. They started enriching up to 60 back in 21, 4 years before the attack last June, but they never went above 60. So it was only a bargaining chip in the first place, and now they get to play it. Oh, you want nuclear progress, huh? I'll tell you what, we'll dilute our 60% back down again. Okay, good. But we're not getting it, and we're not getting an end to all enrichment, although they say they're going to get a longer ban on enrichment, an agreement to not enrich for a longer, perhaps as many as 10 or even 15 years. But we'll see about that. That's certainly not a proven case yet. Although, as I said, their facilities have truly been set back by quite a bit. So Iran isn't really giving up that much to have a moratorium on enrichment where their facilities are basically offline anyway for now. But anyway, and then, oh, and the Strait, I could have added the Strait, became one of the reasons for the war. Okay, so we have not obliterated their civilian nuclear program. We did not get regime change. Killed the Ayatollah, got his son. And the IRGC and hardliners in power.
Yeah, much more hardline than the dad.
That's what they say, and no one's even talking about cutting off support for Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis or anything like that. That's dropped. That's dropped. They forgot about that. And the missile force too. Donald Trump, I don't know if you saw the clip, but it is a riot. It is so funny. I was laughing my ass off, like literally tears in my eyes yesterday, watching Trump going, "Hey, everybody's got to have little missiles. What are you going to do?"
Yeah, I did see that. I did see that, Scott. And you have a great way of explaining it, Scott, to the American people. I mean, I wish more people would hear you. I really, really wish more people would hear you, because you have a way of explaining that is, to my understanding, something that the common man in this country would understand. But I have no clue why they understood the propaganda coming out of AIPAC. Maybe because the amount of money they spent to get that propaganda out.
Well, listen, I decided when I was a teenager, like, am I going to really spend my life correcting people about their wrong politics all the time? Or like, there are other ways to spend a lifetime. You know what I mean? And I thought, you know what, if people can be lied to and will believe any pile of garbage in order to, accept the government doing the wrong thing, then it ought to be easy to tell them the truth. They can lie us in the war. Yeah, we ought to be able to truth them into peace. But like, look, man, and if you sit there and tell them a bunch of lies, and then I tell them the truth should ring truer. You know what I mean? Like, it should be easy for me to win an argument when the war party, especially, but really the government on virtually everything, but especially on foreign policy, they have to lie about everything because what they're doing is wrong. So then, quite honestly, it makes my job easy, right? Like, I get it that maybe it sounds impressive to new people that, like, boy, I know a lot of names and dates and stuff. But the point is just, I've spent all this time contradicting liars. And so I remember the lies and I remember what the truth was at the time that they pushed it. They really wanted us to believe this in the summer of 2013. But the truth was that. And so, whatever. So that's how it goes. That was a reference to the sarin hoax in Syria, but there are a bunch there, it's endless. But that's the thing of it is just, if you figure out what's really going on and you explain it to people, then, I ought to get the reaction I got out of you, which is, yeah, that all sounds right. You know what I mean? Because it's pretty close. I hope people got something out of that. And quite honestly, if you want the deep dive on this, you really want to catch up on everything that I know, you can obviously read my books or go to Scott Horton Academy.
Why don't you put up your books, Scott, and promote
them right here. I got Fool's
Errand. Can you show them to the audience?
Yeah, sure. So
and promote them. Please promote them. Fool's Errand.
Time and War in Afghanistan. Oh, I guess I got it on the
fantastic book. A fantastic book that I've read, and fantastic other books that I've read. Enough already. We are at that stage already, Scott.
Yeah. Oh, I know. And then, so these two are just compilations of interviews. The Great Ron Paul, the greatest American hero ever, and Hotter Than the Sun, all about nuclear weapons. And then this is the big one, is Provoked, how Washington started the new Cold War with Russia and the catastrophe in Ukraine.
This is a new one that you just came out with, which is fantastic.
Thank you, sir. And then just real quick, I have a new project which is called the Scott Horton Academy of Foreign Policy and Freedom, which was my friend Tom Wood's idea. And basically, it's me walking you through Enough Already and Provoked in detail, and essentially giving you the deep dive on all I've learned over all this time.
When did this start?
That's all at it started at the end of last year. And in fact, I just added a little addendum about the recent Iran war. Should be coming very soon here. And it's me doing deep dives on the terror war and on the Cold War, the new Cold War with Russia. And then I also have a bunch of other great experts taking us through on Israel-Palestine, on the history of American wars, on the police state, on Christian Zionism. We have a brand new course coming up very soon on the history of the founding of the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. And and on like that. More and more all the time. That's all at scotthortonacademy.com.
Scott, we have had a fantastic conversation. We're coming to the end. Thank you so much for introducing the books. In the couple of minutes that we have left, why don't you, if you can, tell our audience, now that Trump has maybe accomplished his mission of doing nothing with Iran and spent maybe $1 trillion and made Iran more powerful than before, and destroyed the American base. What comes next?
Oh yeah. So yeah, this is where we're kind of leading up. There was so they hit every American base in the region. Now they didn't completely decimate them all, but they touched each and every one. And they hit mostly radar stations, and they hit planes on the tarmac, and they pitted some runways and stuff like that. But essentially, they were proving the point. Thank goodness they were not trying to kill as many people as possible. We lost 13, mostly in one big attack in Kuwait. But they showed that essentially, speaking of bluffs being called, America's had a bluff in the Middle East since the end of World War II, and especially since the Jimmy Carter years in 1980, when he declared the Carter Doctrine that said that the Persian Gulf is an American lake and nobody ever tried to dominate it, or it'll be considered an attack on the United States of America. Now, he was talking about the USSR then, warning them not to invade Iran and try to dominate the Persian Gulf.
Yes.
Essentially giving almost like an Article 5 level war guarantee to a body of water. Don't you try to or even to revolutionary Iran, which we by then hated for the hostage crisis. We're still giving them a war guarantee to protect them from the Reds, because we don't want the Reds over there, down there in the Gulf. So, and then especially, with Iraq War I in 1990, 91, there's been this massive buildup in the region. And they shuffled some bases around after September 11th, because bin Laden's major grievance was America bombing Iraq from bases in Saudi. And so they wanted to, surrender to the terrorists on that one. Thank goodness, actually, it was the right thing to do, to get most of the bases out of Saudi Arabia and to dial down our presence in Saudi. But still, they have had bases again in Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, Oman. Yeah. So the idea was that not just that we provide security for various countries' ships going in and out of there with their precious cargo and all of that, but that America, in alliance with our Sunni monarchs in the GCC, and including, Jordan, Turkey, and Israel as well, the American sort of dominated order in the region, throw in Egypt as well, that it's all guaranteed by American power, American ships and American planes, and our conventional force. And I think, well, look, I don't know how all the different sultanates in the region are reacting to this, what they think. Some of them may be just begging for more and more American arms, and even, offering to open up more American bases and doubling down. Others of them might follow Qatar's lead and decide that actually we'd rather be closer to Iran in order to protect ourselves that way. Saudi was already working on normalizing relations with Iran anyway. They sort of had officially normalized relations back a couple of years ago.
They have since.
Yeah. So it really could be the case that nobody believes in America's bluff over there. I mean, we're pulling our anti-missile systems out of UAE and sending them to Israel. Well, boy, they're going to remember that and carry hard feelings about that. And in fact, hell, as we saw, they were pulling THAAD defensive missile systems out of South Korea. And that had been a huge political fight for them to even allow those missiles in there in the first place. And the Chinese were pissed and closed. They, kicked South Korean car makers out of China, and were like, their major tariff battle, and like it was a huge deal. China was so pissed that they did that. And then we went and took the missiles out again anyway. Sorry for getting you in such trouble with your neighbors, but we need these missiles for Israel. So what does that mean in the event of any kind of war in the Pacific? That it turns out Seoul and Tokyo and Jakarta and Canberra, you're on your own, dude. We don't have enough missiles for all of y'all anyway. And we can't sail our aircraft carriers near an adversary's country without getting them sunk. So, quite possibly America's conventional military bluff of dominance in the Middle East, in even East Asia and Eastern Europe could be called. I mean, who really thinks that we're going to fight a land war with Russia? Let's say Russia invades the Baltics, 2 of the 3. We're going to really put our, 500,000 man army on the ground and send our entire Navy and Air Force calling to go and kick the Russians out of the Baltics in a place where, potentially we'd be able to just defeat their forces on the ground with pinprick air power type strikes, or maybe not. And that the likelihood would be more than 50% from the jump that we would escalate to nuclear weapons and thermonuclear annihilation and self-extermination over who controls Talon. And give me a break. Now, would Washington be so stupid as to do such a thing? Maybe, but certainly the American people have no taste whatsoever for fighting a war, a conventional war with Russia and Eastern Europe. It's ridiculous. It's comic book crazy to even consider it. And then, so every one of America's allies in the region has got to be questioning. Like, yes, it's true we have H-bombs, and that is the ultimate deterrent. Don't you attack the United States of America, dude. We can erase your capital city. Fine. But are we really going to erase your capital city on behalf of France? On behalf of Germany? On behalf of Poland? Like, maybe not. You know what I mean? So
Yes,
I think
yes,
it
yes.
could be that this is a very quick and a very rapid final sort of exclamation point on the death of the American empire. That has really, the high watermark of the whole thing was Bush's invasion of Iraq in 2003. It's all been a collapse in strength and credibility in every way since then. So could this really hasten an end to the empire? Maybe. Although I don't dread it. I think so many people are afraid that is what is going to hurt us, but I don't think that American society truly thrives and benefits from the empire. People could say, oh, we saved some money on bananas by gangsterizing the El Salvadorians out of their bananas or whatever, but I don't think overall our standard of living benefits from having a
That's
world
an excellent way
empire.
of putting it, Scott. That's
Yeah,
an excellent way of putting it.
that's right. We'll be way better off with a limited republic. So we should just go ahead and call it quits anyway. I hate to say oh, I think that's what's going to happen, because I really have no idea. But this should be a great example of why to just quit. If we can't win a war against Iran, well, who the hell can we win a war against? Again, we could absolutely destroy anyone who threatens our survival. But other than that, what can we really do? Apparently nothing. For example, imagine we try to launch a conventional war to destroy North Korea's military and nuclear weapons capability. No way. They'd get some off before we were done, right? If we were to fight North Korea, the only way to win would be with H-bombs. Otherwise, they can defend themselves. There's nothing we could do about it. Same with China. If China went after Taiwan, we're going to lose thousands of sailors and airmen and aviators and end up escalating to nuclear war and then lose Taiwan anyway? Or, not. Right?
Scott, this is an excellent time is that 1 hour mark? Excellent time to end this program. We have taken enough time of you, and I've thoroughly enjoyed every second of it, Scott. I thought that I was back in UC Berkeley, literally. This is what I thought. Because you have that vibe. You are so personally invested in telling the reality of what is going on.
Well, that much is true. I'm definitely a private property rights guy.
Yeah.
But I am an anti-imperialist for those reasons, in fact. So
yes. And you are in very good company with us, Scott, because if you would ask Rachel, who was very kind to arrange this, look at what we have been doing since we got formed a couple of weeks ago. We have been talking to people just like yourself, and we have been propagating the truth about what really is going on with the U.S. empire, the decline of the U.S. empire, actually. So I hope you can come back again, Scott.
Happy to. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. I'm going to hit the stop, but please keep the recording on, because it takes maybe a minute for it to get uploaded to the Riverside studio.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.